Hello everyone, Craig Ripley here. Welcome to another edition of Living Off the Slab. As you can see from these beautiful colors behind me, it's fall here in New England. That means our riding season is coming to a close here. Winter will be setting in and we won't be able to get out on the bike very much anymore. So what do you do when you can no longer ride your bike? Well, you start planning for next year. So that's what I want to do today. I want to start a conversation about how you go about planning a motorcycle trip. Some people, like me, really enjoy planning. We do most of our planning on the computer and then upload the files to our GPS devices here. Now I know there's still a few of you out there that like to use these things, right? Maps. I know there's not many of us left anymore, but some still like the old paper version. And still others, they don't like planning at all. They'd rather just wet their finger, put it to the wind, and then go where their heart desires. Now, while I do like to just wing it on occasion, most of the time I do like to plan my trips. I like to know where I'm going, I like to know how far I have to go, and of course the time that I have to get there. Now, the reason for this is because, right, we all have jobs, or at least most of us do, and we have to pay mortgages, we have family responsibilities and things that we have to deal with. So we just don't have unlimited time just to get out there on the road and travel, at least not until we get of the age where we can retire. And most of us, well, that's getting to be later and later. Right, so the first thing you need to do when you're planning your trip is, of course, figure out where it is that you want to go. Right, and that can be just on a weekend trip, or it can be for a couple of weeks, or like us, we're planning a trip that's going to cover 5 weeks and we're going to head up to Alaska. So I'm going to use that as an example here, but I think that these concepts and ideas can apply to any length trip. After I decide where I want to go, Anchorage, Alaska, I then sit down and I start doing my research. Are there other people who have done this trip before? Well, in this case, there are many. There are videos out there, there are blogs out there. There's a great website called the Milepost that you can go to that has itineraries that are set up to do this kind of trip. So I start doing the research on all of those things, drawing from all of those, and then figuring out the things that I want to see while I'm going between Boston. So on this trip, the big things that I want to see on the way up are Glacier National Park. I want to do Going to the Sun Road, right? I want to ride through Banff and Jasper, up through the Glacier Parkway. I want to ride up through the Rockies and just see all the beauty that BC has to offer. So that's primarily what I'm looking for on this trip going up to Alaska. Once we get up towards Alaska, well, I want to go up through Dawson City and I want to ride the Top of the World Highway. I hear that's just awesome, so I have to have that on my list. And then I want to go to Fairbanks and I want to go into Anchorage and stop and see Denali along the way. Okay, so after I've done step one, figure out where I want to go, then I do step two, and that is I figure out the things that I want to see while I'm going there. Step three is to sit down and actually create my route. And to do that, I sit down at the computer with my routing software and I literally create my route that goes through all of those locations and all of those things that I want to see. Don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with that process because it can take several hours and sometimes days to actually sit down at the computer and figure out exactly the route that you want to take. You can zoom in, look at satellite views, see what the road looks like. You can read about all of the different roads that you're going to be on so you know that you're really on the roads that are going to give you the best trip. Again, that takes time and it's different with every piece of software that you use. Now, I will say, if you use these things, it probably goes a lot faster. However, if you do use maps, again, there's nothing wrong with doing that, then you can't use one of these, right? You can't load all of your GPX files that you're going to create with your routing software into your GPS device and then have this as an aid on where you want to go. So, you know, when I do these routes, I've done them enough times, you know, by the time we're setting off on the trip, that I really know where I want to go. I know the major roads, but it's nice to have this as a backup. And that's really what it is. It's just a prompt to get me through those areas. In particular, if you're going through cities, it really helps there. Now, of course, after you've done your out trip, you're also going to do your trip back. And if there are things that you didn't get to see on your way out, you're going to pick them up on the way back. Well, make sure you do your research and figure out exactly where you want to go there as well. In the end, you have what I like to call my ideal route. and that is, this is all the places I would love to see if I have the time to do it. However, now I need to sit down and I need to figure out, okay, do I really have the time to hit all these great spots? Right. So to do that, what you really need is one of these, right? Handy dandy little calculator. All right, believe me, there's more computing power in here than the computers that they sent to the moon. At least that's what they tell me. I don't know. All right, so anyway, when I sat down and I created this ideal route to go to Alaska, I ended up with something that was about 5,500 miles each way. Well, I got about an 11,000 mile trip that we have in front of us. And I have a certain amount of time to do this trip. In this case, that is 5 weeks or 35 days is what we have to do this trip. So to figure out if I can actually accomplish this in the time frame that I have, what I have to do is plug in 11,000, it's 11,000 miles divided by 35 days. So this is going to give me the number of miles that I need to travel every day for 35 days in order to do this trip. And that comes out to 314.28 miles. I know what you're thinking. If you've watched my last video when I was talking about doing 500-mile days, right? I said that there's going to be a lot of days when we're going to have to average 400 to 500 miles a day on this trip. So that's why we were preparing to do that. That's why we were out riding our bikes and getting used to riding those kind of big miles on these new bikes for us, right? Again, this thing is only a year old for me. I'm used to being a cruiser rider with a much more comfortable seat on the bike, right? With a lot of wind protection around it. So this is new to me. I have to learn how to ride those big days. Now that number of 315 miles a day, that means that I have to be on the bike every day for 35 days for 315 miles a day. And do I really want to do that? I mean, it's doable. It's very easily doable, but is that really what I want to do? And the answer is no. I want to take some time off of the bike. I always like to include at least 1 or 2 days in a couple of weeks trip where I'm off of the bike. So being that we're going to be on the road for 5 weeks, I want to plan like 5 days where we're off the bike. We can just hang out, we can just relax so that we don't have to worry about getting to the next spot all of the time. Again, give us some downtime, some time to just chill. So that means now that I have 30 days in order to do this trip, not 35. So if we take those same 11,000 miles and we divide it by 30, we now come out with 366.7 miles every day that we're going to be riding. So that's 30 days at 367 miles a day. All right, now I know what you're saying still. All right, Craig, well, that's closer to that 400 miles that you were talking about, but it's still not quite there. It's still only 367 miles a day. And that's true. That is if we rode that number of miles every day. But there are going to be days on this trip where we don't want to do that, right? We're going to want to do a smaller number of days, or we can't do that many miles because of the road conditions or the traffic or what have you that's going to be out there. A couple of examples are when we do Glacier National Park, we're going to have summer traffic out there. We're going to want to go slow. We're going to want to stop. We're going to want to take pictures. So we're probably only going to do a couple of 100 miles that day. Same thing when we get up to Dawson City and then we hit top of the world highway. Well, that's a dirt road pretty much from what I understand, and we might be averaging 35 miles an hour, if that. So even at 185 miles for that road, that's probably all we're going to do that day. And there's going to be several other days on the trip where that's going to be the case, when we're going to be down in that 200-mile range. So whenever we take and do one of those 200-mile days, well, that's 167 miles that I have to add on to some other day. So what usually ends up happening, at least for me, and because we live here on the East Coast, and most of the beautiful riding out in the mountains and the Rockies and all that well, that's all out west. I mean, there's some really nice places to ride up and down the East Coast, down the Blue Ridge Parkway, and you know, the Dragon and the Snake and all of those places down there. And I've done those. Those are beautiful down there. But if you really want to get to the big mountains and the beautiful country out in the west, well, it unfortunately takes a long time for us to get there. For example, let's look at what we're going to have to do on this trip just to get to Glacier National Park, where we really want to start our trip. And we've got to go from Boston out to Glacier, and that's about 26 or 2,700 miles just to get there. So we're going to do some big days up front when we're fresh, when we have the interstate highway systems, when we can go at speeds of, you know, 75, 80 miles an hour, and we can get out there quickly. We're going to do some 500 to 550 mile days for probably about 5 days in a row just to get out to where we want to start the real beautiful part of our trip. We end up with 5 days going out that are going to be in excess of 500 miles, 5 days coming back that are probably going to be in excess of 500 miles again. So now we're at 10 days of our 30 days of riding. So a third of our trip has got to be over 500 miles if we're going to do this in the time that we have allowed. That's going to allow us, as we get up north into these beautiful areas that we really want to see, to slow down and take our time. There'll also probably be some days, you know, in between places where we want to see, like once we get out of the Rockies and we're heading up to Dawson, something like that, then we'll probably go a little faster, right? So we're putting in some extra miles. So we're going to end up with a mix of long days, some shorter days, a couple of long days, and then some short. Breaking it up this way, I think, allows us to enjoy the trip more. And also remember, we've got those days we're off the bike altogether. So like after we do those 5 days in a row, 500 miles or so, then we're going to stop and we're going to take a day off the bike. We're just going to rest, right, before we get back on the bike and before we hit the road again. Again, then we'll ride for about a week, 5-6 days, and then we'll stop and we'll take a day off the bike just to break things up. All right, so that is the gist of how I go about planning a motorcycle trip, or my motorcycle trips. And it's also my explanation for when I was talking about having to do these 500-mile days, and everybody thought I was crazy. Well, again, it's a give and take here, right? You do the big days so that you can do the shorter days in the time frame that you have available to you. Okay, I don't know any other way to do it because I can't extend the trip, right, so that I can take more breaks. I have to do this in the time period that I have allowed. In fact, we're having a little bit of a problem with a couple of the guys already. They're not able to take the 5 weeks, or it doesn't look like they're going to be able to take the 5 weeks. So now we may have to play around with the schedule a little bit so that they can join us at some point, right? Now we're looking at maybe riding out to Boise, and then a couple of the guys will ship their bikes to Boise, and then we'll head up to Alaska from there. That seems to work pretty well. So the other guys that have the 5 weeks, we can still do it like we were planning. But the other guys, they can fly out and they can meet us in Boise. So we'll see how that goes. We're actually going to be meeting, well, this weekend. I don't know when this video is going to get out, but we're meeting and we're going to discuss all of these things. And so I'm hoping that's going to work out for everybody so that all of us can still join in on this trip. Because it would be very disappointing if all of us that have been really planning and working on this couldn't go on it. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure that that happens. All right, guys, so remember, keep buying from Twisted Throttle by going through my website. Again, helps us out. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate all of the great comments. And there are some folks out there, in particular Richard, you know who I'm talking about, who's been sending me a lot of great information on his trip that he took to Alaska. I mean, just volumes he's been sending me. It's awesome. He's been really great. I really appreciate it. It's helped out a ton. So thank you guys. Keep it coming, and give me your comments on, again, what you think about this and how you go about planning a trip. All right, later.